What is up, YouTube? What is up, Jet Nation? Sean back with another episode of the JETS Jets Show. Super excited to be here. Today, we're going to continue our positional grouping reviews of some of my favorite prospects. Today, we're talking edge and tight end. We're going to hit up edge first and kind of go from there, since we're in need of a pass rusher desperately. So, my number one pass rusher on my list, as a lot of people know, is Jermaine Johnson. I think he's a phenomenal all-around. He's the best all-around prospect in this class. I think he's the most developed player, an NFL-ready player in this class. He's got speed. He's got bend. He's strong. He can play the run. He can, rush off the edge. Yeah, just a lot farther along in his development, I think, than some of these other highly rated prospects. So, second on my list, I have Kvontivido. And I put him there in terms of his physical traits. Little stiff coming around the edge, but outside of that, this guy could be very, very special. I do think he has that potential. Now, there's other things about him that worry me a little bit, and I think he could slide him down the board a little bit. But in terms of talent, he's one of the most talented guys in the draft. So number 3 on my edge rusher list is going to be Adrian Hutchinson. I love how this guy plays the game. I mean, he is, he's got that like Pete Rose type, Charlie Hustle type attitude, constant motor. Reminds me a little bit of Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa in that way. I don't think he's as skilled a pass rusher as those two guys, but he just plays the game the same way, and that is something I really admire in players. So that's why I have him third on my list. Number 4th on my list, I do have Trayvon Walker. Upside, huge, athletic, freak. The numbers don't really necessarily back that up, but he did play at Georgia, so there's a lot of great football players on that team that were probably making huge plays at the same time and kind of maybe overshadowed him a little bit. But his skill set's amazing. But I do also then think he has a really low basement. I mean, he could end up being a complete bust. He's one of the guys that has one of the biggest upsides, but one of the biggest downsides at the same time. So, moving on to my last spot of edge rushers, I had a lot of trouble with this. It was between Karlaftis and Boye Mafe, and I decided to go with Mafe because I think he's just more well-rounded and he has a little bit better skill set. I think Karlaftis is I think he's a little stiff and a little limited around the, with speed around the edge. So I do think his upside is a little more limited. So I decided to go with Boye Mafe as number 5. So I think he'd be a phenomenal edge rusher in this class. So I can even see him being, at the end of the day, being better than Trayvon Walker. So we'll have to see, though. And then for a guy down the list that I'm looking at, I guess a little bit of a sleeper here. I'm going to say Michael Clemens out of Texas A&M, 6'5", 263. I think consistency is the thing with him. He's good against the run, but I think he's a little inconsistent in terms of a pass rusher. But he's very physical. He's got a good motor. I have him kind of rated as a 4th-round pick, and I think, if we were going to look at getting a second edge rusher, I do think we draft one high in the class. But if we really wanted to double down on that position and lock it down longer term, and get a second guy that's a really good value pick, I think he could be a good value pick in the 4th round. I happen to like his skill set a lot. So let's move over to the tight ends now. Take a look at the tight ends, and this should be pretty quick. I'm not going to go too deep into this class. I know we addressed tight end a lot in free agency, so I do think we may draft one, but I do think it's going to be in the later rounds. But let me just run down my list. I do have Trey Mcbride as my #1 tight end. I do not think he's a first-round prospect, though. I think he's a mid-second-round prospect. I do think he's a nice, well-rounded player. You know, he can block well. He can catch the ball well, stretch the seam. He's reliable with his hands. And, yeah, I think he'd be a great big slot almost as well. So, second on my list, I do have Jeremy Rucker out of Ohio State, who is a Jet fan, of course. And, you know, I don't think he was utilized to his best skill set at Ohio State. I mean, they're loaded at wide receiver, so those are the main weapons in the passing game. This guy was probably like the 5th or 6th option in the passing game, so you didn't necessarily get to see his full skill set. But when he was called upon, he made the plays. He had reliable hands, caught some touchdowns, and made some really awesome plays. So I think his upside is really big. You know, I think a lot of this tight end group is a little, it's definitely not top heavy. It's very deep in the middle of the class, 2nd, 3rd round. It's going to have a ton of good, talented, solid NFL players. I don't think you're going to get a really high-end Antonio Gates type guy out of this class, though. So, third on my list is going to be Isaiah Likely. I think he's a little more of a flex tight end. I think he's not necessarily he's not nearly as good a blocker as McBride or Rucker is. So that's why I moved him down the list a little bit. But he does have a little bit more explosiveness as a pass catcher. So that's why I put him in my #3 spot. My #4 is going to be Jilani Woods. Everybody knows I love this guy. He's big. He's huge. Can stretch that seam, and he's a great target in the red zone. And I think he'd be a great guy to develop behind the 2 guys we have now, and step into a starting role in a few years. You know, I just think he's a little raw. So I think he's got a little work to do and a little ways to go to get to where he needs to be. So. My 4th guy on the list is going to be Jake Ferguson, and I just feel like he's an old school, solid, all-around tight end. And, you know, in this type of system, I do think we need a balanced tight end. We can't just have a flex. We can't just have an inline blocker. We need a guy that is kind of a hybrid and can do a lot of different things and is flexible, and I think you can do that. So, and then kind of my sleeper that we can get later on in the draft as a tight end. You know, I have him listed as a 5th-round prospect, and this is a guy that was talked about as a late 1st, early 2nd-round pick at one point in time, and that's Jalen Windermere. I mean, I think people have gotten really down on him. I don't really see him as I mean, maybe the NFL sees him as a 5th-round prospect, and that's why he's down in a lot of the rankings. But I mean, I don't see it. I do feel like him and Likely are really close together in terms of players, and I do think they're both like more flex tight ends. So depends on the system you're looking at, the system you're running, and what kind of tight ends you have on your roster now, and whether the players will help complement each other. So that's all I got for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you like the content, as always, you know what to do, and I'll see you next time. Peace.